All right, so we're diving into this dividend investing for beginners, going beyond the basics here, getting ready for this deep dive. Hopefully we can make these dividends work, uncover the good, the bad, and all the strategy you need to succeed.
Yeah, I think de Klerk really lays out a solid framework in this book. It's really easy to get caught up in this idea of passive income, but like always, what they say, the devil's in the details.
That's right. And knowing your interest in building this long-term wealth, I think you'll find these details interesting. And he doesn't sugarcoat the challenges, which is good.
Yeah, he really digs into why dividend investing matters, especially for certain goals.
Okay, so for those who are new to this whole thing, let's just do a super quick rundown. Dividend investing, what is it? Owning a piece of a company that pays out some of its profits to shareholders, like getting a bonus check just for being involved,
Yeah, and the cool thing is these dividends can actually provide some stability in your portfolio even when the market is kind of going crazy.
which is a huge plus, especially if you aren't looking to be, actively trading every single day. But this book doesn't just stop at the what. It goes headfirst into the pitfalls. And let's face it, they're important to understand before we even think about picking stocks.
Exactly. A company might look really enticing with a high dividend yield, but that doesn't mean it's automatically a good investment. We need to look at how sustainable those payouts really are.
Right, that reminds me of this whole concept. He calls it dividend yield traps.
Hmm.
It's like being lured in by this siren song,
Yeah.
That high yield might sound tempting, but could be a red flag.
Yeah, precisely. It could be a sign that the company is struggling and might even cut the dividend in the future.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Oh.
So if yield alone isn't everything, what should we be focusing on when we're evaluating dividend-paying companies? I'm seeing a whole chapter here dedicated to dividend growth.
Yeah, this is where it gets interesting. See, while that high dividend yield right now sounds great, it's also important to consider whether those payouts are going to grow over time.
So it's about finding that sweet spot, balancing that potential for immediate income with the potential for long-term growth.
Exactly. You know that saying, a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. Do you want the guaranteed payout now or invest in the potential for a larger payout later?
That's a great analogy. And this is where he introduces the concept of payout ratio. Can you explain how that ties into all of this?
Of course. The payout ratio is essentially a measure of how much of a company's earnings are paid out as dividends. A really high payout ratio might, it might indicate that a company is giving a large portion of its profits to shareholders. This could leave less room for reinvestment and future growth.
So a lower payout ratio could actually suggest that the company is prioritizing reinvestment and maybe setting the stage for higher dividends down the road.
Yeah, you got it. It's all about understanding how a company prioritizes its capital allocation.
This is starting to feel less like passive investing and more like detective work.
Well, informed investing often feels that way, and that's what de Klerk really encourages in this book.
Yeah, it's like we need one of those financial magnifying glasses to really look into these companies. So what are some of the other key clues besides this payout ratio that can help us separate the good from the bad?
Well, de Klerk really emphasizes looking at the financials beyond just the dividend yield. Strong earnings, manageable debt, healthy cash flow, these are all good signs.
So we're looking for companies with a really solid foundation, not just throwing dividend cash around.
Yeah, and it's not even just about the numbers either. He talks about understanding the industry a company's in and even the management team's track record.
Right, because a company could look amazing, on paper, but if their industry is struggling or the people in charge aren't so great, those dividends might not be safe.
Exactly. It's about connecting those dots between the financials and the bigger picture.
Now, he also talks about building a dividend growth portfolio.
Hmm.
What's the strategy there, and how is it different from just picking, individual stocks?
So that's a great question. Building a dividend growth portfolio is less about chasing the highest yields right now. It's more about companies that have a history of increasing their dividends over time.
So it's a long game, huh? Focusing on companies that will share their profits as they grow.
Exactly. And a core principle of this is diversification.
Right, not putting all our eggs in one basket, even if that basket is full of dividend checks. How do you diversify a dividend portfolio?
Good question. De Klerk says to branch out into different sectors and industries. So, if one sector isn't doing well, the others can kind of balance it out. He also talks about geographic diversification, too.
Oh, interesting. So looking at international companies as well.
Exactly. Adding another layer of diversification and tapping into growth in other parts of the world.
This is starting to sound like we're building a global dividend empire. But before we get ahead of ourselves, the Clerck has a whole section on advanced strategies. One that I found interesting was dividend laddering. What is that all about?
Ah, dividend laddering. It's really interesting, especially if you want consistent income from investments, maybe for retirement.
Okay, now you're talking my language.
Yeah.
So how does this laddering work?
Imagine investments maturing at different times, kind of like rungs on a ladder. With dividend laddering, you invest in stocks with different ex-dividend dates and payout schedules.
So instead of getting like one big payout at the end of the year, you create a stream of income all year.
Exactly, smoothing out those bumps, making a more predictable cash flow. Of course, like anything, it needs some planning and research.
Speaking of planning, de Klerk doesn't forget about the less exciting stuff, taxes. Nobody loves taxes, but we got to factor them
Yeah,
in, right?
absolutely. And as he points out, not all dividends are taxed the same. There's qualified dividends and non-qualified dividends. Knowing the difference is important.
For those of us who don't speak tax code, could you break that down?
Sure. Qualified dividends are taxed lower than your regular income. Non-qualified are usually taxed at your normal rate.
Gotcha. So knowing which type of dividend you have can save you some money come tax time.
Exactly. And he also reminds us about those tax-advantaged accounts, 401ks, IRAs. Those can be great for dividend stocks.
Now, that's smart, growing your wealth and saving on taxes. But he doesn't stop there. There's a whole chapter on alternatives to dividend investing. It's like he's saying, hey, there are other ways to get passive income.
I love that he included that. It's good to remember that even if you're all about dividends, there are other income-generating strategies out there.
So what are some of those alternatives that he mentions?
Oh, he covers a bunch of them, like real estate. You get
Mhm.
that income from the rent, right? And then there are those peer-to-peer lending platforms. Those can give you interest payments.
So it's like spreading out your income beyond the stock market, which, let's be real, can be a little unpredictable sometimes.
Exactly. He even talks about owning a business, which could be passive income. But he's careful to say, that it takes a lot of work up front.
True, but I bet some people would say being their own boss and building something is worth it. So it seems like he's saying we've got options when it comes to building wealth, right? But I feel like there's more to it.
Yeah, you're right. He says no matter what you choose, whether it's dividends or these alternatives, you have to do your research.
So don't just jump at the first good thing you see.
Right. Like they say, measure twice, cut once. You got to understand the risks and make sure it all fits with your goals.
Which brings us to that thought-provoking question he leaves us with. Ready for this one?
Hit me with it.
Okay, so he asks, if a company has enough cash flow for dividends, wouldn't it be better to reinvest that money back into the business? Wouldn't that mean even bigger profits and maybe larger dividends later on?
Now, that's a good question that could start a whole debate. It makes you think about how companies decide where their money goes.
Right. It's like they're trying to keep shareholders happy now, but also grow for the future.
Exactly, and there's no easy answer. It depends on so many things like their industry, how much they're already growing, even the economy.
So more research is needed. I can't believe I'm saying that.
Always a good idea. But really, this question reminds us that there are always different ways to think about dividend investing.
It's about more than just getting those dividend checks. It's about understanding why they're paying them and if it works for you.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, there you have it. We covered dividend investing with de Klerk. The good, the bad, and everything in between.
And we even talked about other ways to earn passive income, reminding ourselves there isn't just one right way to invest.
So keep learning, keep your investments diverse, and keep those dividend checks coming.
Happy investing, everyone.